Hi, I'm Dave Phinney, founder and partner and winemaker at Locations. Locations is a brand we started about 6 years ago. We're on our fifth vintage or fifth release. The impetus for the brand, I was in the Sheraton at the Charles de Gaulle Airport, which is the most soulless hotel in the world. And I was outside talking to the general manager of our winery in Mory in the south of France, and we were sort of lamenting the fact that there was so much sort of bulk wine out there in France. It was right in the sort of the height of the crisis, and the idea that some of that wine must be good, and because it's non-appellated and it's from regions that aren't popular or famous or expensive, it's just there's not French consumption has gone down, yada yada yada. We'd heard the government was actually buying some of the bulk and turning it into ethanol, and right as we were talking, and the idea being, well, some of it's got to be good, and what if you could just make a wine from France, call it, with no rules. At the time we weren't even thinking about vintage, but that did come into play, but non-appellated, non-vintage, and ended up being non-appellated, non-varietal, and then ended up being non-vintage. And as we're having this conversation, a taxi pulls up, and it had that ubiquitous bumper sticker with the F for France. And I got off the phone with this guy, his name is Richard Case, and just went into my notes and wrote that idea, not really putting the two together right then. And then about 6 months later, the idea resurfaced, and ironically enough, we put the French wine together first, and it was from the Rhone, a bit from Provence, from the Roussillon, a little Languedoc, and some Bordeaux. And had the blend done. It was hilarious because it was in the Sofitel in Marseille, and this was right after that, what's his name? The guy that got in all the trouble in the Sofitel in New York. Oh, the old head of the IMF. DKF, what was his name? Dominique Strauss-Kahn. Yeah. Yes. So like a week later, I'm sitting in a Sofitel, and that was my only reference to Sofitel hotels, which was pretty funny. But so we put the blend together there because it was a centrally located place. And actually, I think the French wine was bottled first. But in order to vest the trademarks, because if we did a France and then someone did a Spain or an Italy or a California, we would have been first to market, but to really secure the trademark, and it was just more fun to go make wine in other places, we decided to do almost at the same time Spain, Italy, and France. And we actually led with Spain, and then France, and then Italy, and then right behind that Corsica, and then it just mushroomed from there. But the underlying idea in all those wines is to make something that's, in all our wines we're always trying to over deliver, but when you have basically no rules, it should be easier. At a certain price point, we knew that this couldn't be $50 bottle of wine, or if it either had to be one or the other. Either you shoot for the moon or have something that's much more scalable, which obviously we have the world to work with. There's scalability, and keeping the price down so people could try these wines, and then making it better than any $15 bottle of wine out there. So that first vintage of Spain, I went back and forth. In 6 months, I went back to Spain 8 different times to put the blend together, which, we took that, obviously we take all the wines seriously, but that was the level of seriousness, because we didn't want it to come off as a gimmick or this cute label, but the wine's just there, it was like, oh, it's kind of a cool label, and my God, that wine's really good. I would say it's a combination of exposing people to either areas or countries that they, not necessarily that they would, for a lot of people, for a long time, I still look at Burgundy labels and have to call my father-in-law, and I love Burgundy. And so it was a way of getting, again, we were not trying to champion any one of these countries, but just really dumb it down to its base level of, this is what a French wine may taste like, and if you like this, you might then start getting interested in the country of France or Italy or Spain. So that was kind of cool. And then also having it at a price point where the wine quality would be high enough that it wouldn't be oh, well, I had this, $10 whatever level Bordeaux, and it was super green and tannic and 11.5% alcohol. That would turn a lot of people off from French wines because they're just thinking Bordeaux, France. They might never drink a French wine again. So that was a part of it, but it was the first step was, if we don't find the wines, we're just not going to do it. And it became clear right away that we were going to be able to, at least in France and Spain. Italy was really tough, ironically, but France and Spain were instantly, with just the first round of samples that we got from friends or friends of friends, we're like, all right, this is proof of concept, we can do this. So then it became very much, we're extremely internally competitive as well. So it was like, all right, well, how good can we make this? And with this, a little bit of a contrarian in the sense of, it doesn't have to be varietal. And I preach that in California already, but it doesn't have to be varietal, and it doesn't have to be from an AOC to be a good wine. And the vintage thing, like I said, that was like, well, if we're already doing these two things, let's see if we could start messing around with non-vintage and really open up the complexity sort of spice box. I hate saying spice box, and that was nuts. That really was game changing. Being able to go back vintage, and then also now we selectively hold back certain lots that we think will age better for a certain piece of the puzzle. So that's been huge. And having said that, though, what we didn't want to do is we number each not vintage, but each release. I think it's the right thing to do if you're not going to do vintage, because we don't want to make people believe that it's the same wine every time. Our goal is to create a style and then build on that style and maintain the consistency, but just make it better every year. And that's with every wine. I think with locations, we have a better chance of that because we have, again, no rules, so it makes it a lot easier. But there was that point where we had to, look in the mirror and say, hey, if the quality of wine isn't there, or if the quality of wine isn't there at this price, could we do it at a higher price? There's a lot of those discussions. But in the end, it turned out to not be an issue. It's very important, again, to mitigate any perception of gimmicky, cute, all that, which we were very cognizant of it could go that direction. Part of it is always wanting to go to a place like Corsica. Part of it was having a friend there. A lot of things fell into place. And the other part was that we wanted to not just appeal to, again, it was the next level of introduction. I'd only had a couple Corsican wines, Vermentinos, before I went to Corsica. So it was it was an experience for me. So in a way, I got the locations experience for myself, and we've continued to do that. But with Corsica, it was also trying to see what we could do with a completely different style than most people expected. And that's a very low alcohol wine. It's under 12.5%. It is meant to really be not a typical. We wanted to represent Corsica, just like all the other wines. We want to represent that area, region, country. That to me is very representational of Corsica. It's got that salinity. The vineyard and the winery itself are, from here to the tasting room is the ocean. So it's that close. But and you can see with the label, one of the things that we've been very fortunate and have either had or made friends in these places. And once I started to understand the Corsican people and their proud nature, out of respect and deference, to the country, so to speak, we didn't want to use the Corsican flag, which is called the Tête de Mort. And if you don't know what you're looking at, people are very proud of it who know what it is. But if you don't know what you're looking at, it could be misconstrued. Eyes when I go there, but it's very common in Corsica to have a lot of shepherds, and they have these beautiful knives, sometimes Damascus steel, and this is a ram's horn. And so to me, this is very sort of Corsican, and it meant something to me too. So there was a connection there, because I, bought the knife on the label is actually one that I gave to my wife. So, which is a little scary if you've ever met her, and I mean that in the best way, wherever you are. But and that's my point with locations is we'll even go as far with the label to make sure that it's true to the place. And for the most part, the country code stickers are more than enough. But we're looking into the Canary Islands, and what was another place we just spoke about where I've got to remember where the flag wouldn't necessarily be the right thing to do, or the country code, or when the country code is so obscure that people wouldn't know. And that's we don't want to make it too hard. It's meant to be easy to recognize. I think it'll almost be, when we sit around, joking around about it, I don't want to say it's like seasonal beers, but like Corsica will come in, and it's lower production. It'll probably come and go pretty quickly. We do something like the Canary Islands. Also, there's just not as much volume available. So, and then we'll focus on, there'll be this sort of more driver brands, Italy, France, Spain especially, New Zealand, Sauvignon Blanc, California, and then the Oregons, Washingtons, Portugal. We do a Texas locations that's available only in Texas, which I couldn't talk about a wine that I said I would never make, and then ended up really falling in love with some of the wines there, which really surprised me. So it's focusing on, we don't want to say the big three, but the big five, and then always keeping, I don't want to say relevant, but current with different wines. Because then as people get to know our style, they'll be like, oh, well, I've never had a wine from Corsica. I know these guys, I'll try that one, or Canary Islands, or Portugal, or whatever these areas that generally speaking you wouldn't go down to your local store and look for one.